Entitlement reaches all walks of life, as you'll find out in this episode of Entitled People. Our first one is from Not a Cop Throwaway. I, 21 male, have an older brother Dave, fake name, that has always been a jerk to me. There's only a 1-year gap between us, but he liked to beat me up when we were kids, and he always acted like anything that was mine was also his. He was also somewhat the golden child, which made me miserable. So no surprise I moved out at 18. My uncle is now a retired police officer and he took me in after I left home. He even hooked me up with a decommissioned Crown Vic. I absolutely love that car. I don't know why, but Dave hated the fact that I had that car. He drove 3 beater cars into the ground while my Crown Vic kept chugging along. Well after his 3rd beater finally died when he drove it into a pole, he asked to borrow my car. I had a bad feeling and said I wasn't gonna do that. He called me entitled and said he needed the car to get to work. I told him to take the bus because I know how he drives and my Crown Vic was off limits. My parents called me after that and told me to just lend him my car. I said I won't, no matter what they say. I rely on the car and need it as well since it's my personal transportation. Dave wasn't the only one in the world with a job he needed to get to. My uncle congratulated me for standing up to them and gave me a high five. A few days later when I got off work, the car wasn't where I parked it. I called my brother's cell, but he didn't pick up. Then I called my parents and asked them if he took my car. They denied it, so I said I was gonna call the cops, and then they admitted he'd borrowed it because he needed it. I told them that he better bring it back right now or I'll have the police looking for him. They called me a jerk and then phoned Dave to bring my car back. He showed back up in the parking lot in my car 20 minutes later. I demanded to know how he stole my car, and he held up a set of police Crown Vic keys he'd bought online. Some were made universal. I told him if he ever stole my car again, I'd have him arrested. Then he had the audacity to ask for a ride home. I told him he made me wait in the December cold after stealing my car so he could walk. He called me a jackass before I drove away. After that, my uncle installed a tracking device in the car. When Christmas Day came, I was celebrating with my family like every year. The roads were cold and icy, so I had to be very careful while driving. But now you've probably clued in on the title. Yeah, Dave borrowed my car again during the Christmas party. Apparently, he decided he was gonna go pick up a friend and figured I wouldn't notice. But I did when I looked out the front window and saw my car was missing. I pulled up the tracking app and saw he was a few miles away, then called his cell to yell at him. Everyone in the party saw this and asked what was going on. I said Dave stole my car again, and my uncle confirmed it wasn't the first time. Dave told me over the phone to screw off and he'd be back soon. I said he better not have been drinking, but he just hung up on me. Well, while I was watching the tracker app, the dots stopped and didn't move for a while. Soon we got a panicked call from Dave asking for help. He'd crashed the car because he couldn't handle the icy roads and he wasn't used to a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So we piled in my parents' minivan and followed the tracker. We found Dave by the road in my Crown Vic nose deep in a snow-filled ditch. My uncle was furious as it was formerly a car of his department, and I was mad at hell at Dave for stealing my car again. My parents wanted me to let it go, but I said enough was enough and was gonna call the police. Dave begged me not to because he really had been drinking before he set off and would get a DUI. I said he was gonna pay me back for my damned car then or I'd sue him. Well, as luck would have it, police were already aware of the accident and were driving in to check the scene. Someone else had called them, I guess. My parents tried to say that I was the one driving the car and they were just there to help me. I said that wasn't true and my uncle backed me up. In fact, one of the cops that was there recognized my uncle and they had a chat. They then went to Dave and asked to see his license, which I then found out was suspended after he'd crashed his previous car. Then they breath tested him. He wound up in cuffs slapped on his wrists while my mother was crying and begging the police not to take him away, but the officer just said that she and my dad could get arrested too for lying to police. That shut my parents up. And we got back in the minivan. The Christmas party was ended early and my parents drove me and my uncle home since he rode with me. They didn't say much to either of us the whole drive, just sped away as soon as we were out of their van. They nearly slipped off the road themselves doing that. My brother was let out of jail the next day, and he looked so scared he was practically crying. The cops there had roughed him up a bit while talking about prison and the shit they'd seen go on there. David actually pissed himself during that, and they let him take a shower. That's when my uncle started cracking up and revealed to us that his friends in the department never filed the DUI, just the charge for the suspended license, which was about a $600 fine. My uncle said he just wanted to teach Dave a lesson, and this would be the one and only time he'd ever get this help. Dave then apologized to me and said he'd pay to have my Crown Vic fixed and would never touch it again. When it got pulled out of the ditch, the front end damage was actually minor. It needs a new front bumper, a headlight, and a grille. The damage was just superficial, thankfully. My parents have pretty much glossed over the whole incident and act like it didn't happen. Dave gave me the extra Crown Vic keys he bought online and says this has taught him a lesson he won't soon forget. You know, I don't understand this, whether you're family or not, just because your family doesn't entitle you to their things. I'm hoping after all of this, Dave really did learn his lesson and won't try this ever again. And our final one is from Love the Yankees. My mother lived in a retirement community, small houses very close together. The gentleman who lived next door died and left the house to his son, who moved in with his wife, both about age 35. Even though this was a violation of the rules, at least one member of the household has to be over 55, no one really cared since the guy said he was just staying there for a few weeks until his new house was ready. Almost a year later, he was still there. Meanwhile, Mom got her first PC, and the only option for broadband was DSL from the local telephone company. I think the speed was 2 megabits and cost about $25 a month. When the telco installed the modem and router combo, the tech enabled Wi-Fi and never set up any security. One day Mom called me because her internet speed was really slow. I stopped by and found another PC was connected to the Wi-Fi. After verifying that she had no idea what this other PC was and had certainly not given anyone permission to use her connection, I disabled it. I also changed the router login credentials from the factory default. About 20 minutes later, the neighbor knocked on the door asking if everything was okay with her internet. Yup, all good. I said if he was having problems with his service, he should call the telco. He said that he doesn't have his own service. Since he's only living there temporarily, it didn't make sense for him to pay for his own service when he could just borrow Mom's Wi-Fi. But now he can't connect. Perhaps something was blocking the antenna. He wanted to come in and take a look. I politely explained that the antenna is fine. He can't connect to her Wi-Fi because I disabled it. He got very upset and demanded I enable it. I suggested he call the telco and get his own service. He said it would take several days for the telco to get it set up, and what was he supposed to do until then? I suggested he use the free internet at the public library, but I was not going to enable her Wi-Fi. If he had been nice and said he would call the telco to get his own service, and maybe offered to split the cost, I would have enabled the Wi-Fi until it was set up. But since he was such a jerk, I just shut the door. Edit: I should have been more clear. This happened a few years ago. My mother didn't want to start a battle with her neighbor, but other residents complained that if this guy was allowed to live there, why couldn't their grandkids stay for the summer? The HOA got a court order to make him vacate the property. He tried to fight it but lost. He was told he could retain ownership and rent it out, leave it empty, and still pay the monthly maintenance fee or sell it. He sold it and moved. The thing is obviously this guy clearly had no desire to get his own place or anything like that. My guess was he was trying to stay there as long as physically possible before he was removed like he was in the end. I'm glad you were able to get it all settled, taken care of, and that he's no longer a neighbor there. Alright, that's enough entitlement for the day. Well, that wraps up this episode of Entitled People. If you liked the video, please drop a like, share my content on all of your social media, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to hit that bell so you're notified every time I upload, and drop a comment down below. It really helps with the algorithm and helps new people find my channel. Thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons, have a great day and stay safe out there.